Hey guys, my name is Peyton. This video will kind of go over how to install Home Assistant as well as what to know before installing Home Assistant. This will also give some really good things to learn to know about Home Assistant as well. But before we get started, I'm going to go over kind of some resources that I'll reference in this video. So first thing is the Home Assistant docs. So the documentation that Home Assistant has on their website. It's extremely important to kind of learn how to read documentation when you're going through the Home Assistant process, as well as any process before you install something new. I also reference a lot of YouTube videos, so there's a lot of good videos out there already where people kind of go through the installation process. Hopefully mine is a little bit different because I'm basically brand new to the Home Assistant installation, so I'm going to kind of show how easy it is to install it and configure everything. So now, what exactly is Home Assistant? Home Assistant is a centralized hub where you can kind of have all your smart lights, smart bulbs, smart switches, smart appliances, smart plugs, have everything into one software. And I know Samsung has their smart things. I know Apple has their HomeKit, but Home Assistant is open source. That means whatever, it doesn't matter what type of light switch you have, like what party it's from, who makes it. Hopefully, Home Assistant will already have functionality where you can implement any kind of third-party kind of device into it. Now, I know there is already apps out there, like Eufy has an app for their smart lights. I know there's things for for Samsung smart plugs. So Home Assistant already has all that into one software. So instead of having to do 5 different apps, you can already have one app called Home Assistant where you can control everything. Now there is 2 ways to install Home Assistant. The first way is through Home Assistant Core, and this is through a Docker container, or this is through containerization. If you don't know what containerization is, it's basically a fancy word for a computer within your computer. Now, all you'll need to do for this is basically install Home Assistant Core on your computer. So it doesn't matter if you have Windows or Mac or whatever. You basically install it through a Docker container, and then through that container, you actually run Home Assistant. So it seems pretty easy, but the only downside of this is whenever you turn off your computer, Home Assistant will also turn off since your computer is off. Since that Docker container relies on your computer being on, whenever you shut off your computer, unfortunately, Home Assistant also shuts down. Now, the second way, the most common way and the most easiest way is through Home Assistant OS. Now, you will need some sort of computer. I have this Intel NUC that cost me like $200 to install Home Assistant on. You can also use a very cheap Raspberry Pi 3 or 4 if you're looking for more budget-friendly options. But through this Home Assistant OS already has an all-in-one solution. So it has Home Assistant Supervised, which is like a kind of admin view of your Home Assistant operating system. It also handles the setup, handles the configuration, handles the basic maintenance that you'll basically need to do throughout your Home Assistant process. So this is a very easy way to install it. So like I said, you can have it on a Raspberry Pi. I'll be using this Intel NUC that I'll show later in this video how to install it. But that's some very basic information to know before we get started into Home Assistant installation. All right, so if you're using an Intel NUC, you want to have some way to flash to an SSD. Unfortunately, you can't use the USB. I've tried that and it just won't work with the Intel NUC. So in this case, I used an Insignia kind of docking station to basically hook up to your computer, and then you can flash or copy whatever contents onto the SSD from your computer. Okay, so now you're just going to navigate to the Home Assistant installation. You can just basically Google Home Assistant installation and whatever device you're using. In my case, it's Intel NUC, so it has a prerequisite of basically if you have a PC, you can do this. And then the configure the BIOS section we'll get to in a little bit later, but we'll need to configure a couple of things in that section. And then if we scroll down, you can see that we have the actual right image to your boot media. And then in this case, it says local storage or storage device. So make sure you have an SSD and a docking station to use it, because you can't use a USB. So now we'll just download the latest etcher, and then we'll flash from URL. So you can say flash from URL, obviously, and then copy this link down here below, and paste that into that field. And then once we hit OK, we can then pick our whatever we're flashing to. So now we can select what we're exactly flashing to. In this case, mine was up top, but yours might be hidden. Just make sure you don't hit these red kind of red options, because that's where your actual OS is installed. And then once you start flashing that, you'll get to a screen saying it's been flashed successfully, and then you can just move on with the video. Okay, so here you have the Intel NUC. This is the front side, so it's very small, very compact. So you have the power button to USB. On the back, you have an Ethernet port, which we'll be using, as well as some other USB ports and HDMI. So this is the SSD that's flashed. So you guys saw a picture of it in a video of it being used on Etcher, and this is where you'll be booting the Home Assistant OS onto. So let's take this apart. You can see there's little screw holes on the back. And then there are some wires plugged into this, so we will take these out. Took a little bit of force, but they're out. And so here you have the RAM, the motherboard, which you can obviously see there. And then here you can see there's like two little black lines in there, and that's where the SSD will go. So you just line up the lines with the SSD, and you can just slide it in. Like so. A little bit of push until it's in there, and so you can see it's in there. It won't come out. And then all we just need to do is hook this back up. Okay, and then now we'll take this to a computer to get it booted up, and we can change a couple settings in the boot menu. Okay, so once you plugged in your NUC to your Sun monitor, you can press F2 when you turn the NUC on, and you'll be greeted with this boot menu. Please don't be intimidated, it's really easy. We'll just change a couple things. So the first thing is make sure that this boot priority, that your SSD is on top. Just that way it can boot first. And then you'll change this OS selection from Windows to Linux, because we're not going to be using any sort of Windows. And the rest of these options, so you can just keep default, but it might help for you just to read through them and know what they do. And then you'll go back up to the secure boot, and then you just want to make sure that you have the secure boot off. That way, you can actually install Home Assistant from that SSD. If you try to boot into it with secure boot on, it won't work. So just make sure you turn it off, and Home Assistant is secure, so no worries there. So then you can just save and press yes, and it'll turn off and on. And then you'll be blasted with a couple thousand lines of code. So this was just it starting up. You can see me in the background just waiting on it. Didn't really take that long. And from here you can plug in the Ethernet cable. So I went ahead and plugged it in. And so it'll notice that the Ethernet cable is on, and then it'll start the actual formatting of the Home Assistant on the Intel NUC. And so once you see this Home Assistant screen, you're basically golden. You can go to the URL, which I'll show later, and then you can navigate to Home Assistant. So now you can go to your browser and type in homeassistant.local:8123. And that :8123 is basically the port that Home Assistant is using on your network. So if you see this welcome screen, you've done it, you've successfully installed Home Assistant. And so all you just need to do is sign in with an account. Then you're going to be asked some more questions. And then this one is basically the devices and stuff that it's been found in your network. And then this is the default dashboard. So no, it's not pretty, but we can update it later. But this overview tab is your dashboards. This energy tab is what energy has been consumed on all your devices. The map is obviously a map. The logbook is basically a list of things that have happened in your smart home. So like a plug has been turned on. History is kind of the same thing. And the media browser is where you can import, videos and display it on all your screens. So this integrations tab is where you're going to integrate, your devices, smart plugs, anything of the sort. So we'll be using this in the future. And so this Home Assistant Cloud is, if you choose to, you can pay $5 a month to control your devices away from home, and it directly supports the Home Assistant developers. There are ways where you can, find a reverse proxy or find videos that use reverse proxy, but in my kind of research and experience, that's kind of hard to do. So I recommend you guys to support the developers. It's just $5 a month to gain, basically unlimited capacity to control your devices away from home. All right, guys, that concludes this video. Hope it wasn't too long. Hope you guys learned a lot from it. I certainly have. So these next few videos, we'll talk about actually setting up devices, the dashboard, maybe some automations. So I'll see you next time.